I'm Sari Kimbell, and I've done just about everything in the food industry. I have helped hundreds of packaged food business entrepreneurs, and now I want to help you make your delicious dream a reality. Whether you want to be successful at farmers markets, online, or wholesale onto store shelves, food business success is your secret ingredient. I will show you how to avoid an expensive hobby and instead run a profitable food business. Now let's jump in. All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. It is the week of Christmas, and I thought this is going to be such a great episode to talk with Tamra Ryan of the Women's Bean Project. It's such a phenomenal organization, and it relates so perfectly into CPG and into packaged food. And it just lined up so wonderfully. So I am excited to welcome Tamra Ryan, and she is the CEO and accidental food entrepreneur of the Women's Bean Project. So welcome, Tamra. Thanks for being here.
It's nice to be here, especially this time of year.
Yeah. So, I want you to tell us all the things. You're going to do such a better job at explaining all of this. But you were on a panel recently for Colorado FoodWorks, Women in CPG. And I just love that, Women's Bean Project is a nonprofit. I have worked with a couple of social enterprise groups out of CSU in the past that wanted to start a packaged food business, in hopes of giving people, working skills and helping them grow into other skills and move on. But I've never actually worked with anybody who actually did it. So, or talked with anyone. So, this may be something that some people are contemplating, or in any case, it's just such a wonderful example of doing good in the world with food and helping others. So can you just tell us more about what the Women's Bean Project is and a little bit more about you?
Well, we are really two businesses under one roof. We are a food manufacturing business. We make a line of food products that started with bean soup. So that's the genesis of our name. But now consists of dry food mixes from bean soup to baking mixes, and then some instant beans and rice cups to snacks and popcorn. And we've expanded our product line pretty extensively. But in 1989, we started with one bean soup mix and employed two women who were experiencing chronic unemployment. And how we define that is a woman we hire typically has not had a job longer than a year in her lifetime, though the average age is 38. So they have long histories of typically addiction and incarceration and domestic violence and homelessness, and all the things that would get in the way of being able to get and keep a job. So that's one business that we're running. We're helping women move from chronic unemployment into mainstream employment. And how we do that is by employing them in our food manufacturing business.
I love it. And then I was reading on your website that you provide training as well. So not just in the food manufacturing, but you provide some other trainings, and all of that is paid work time as well. Is that right?
Right. Every woman is hired for a full-time job. Okay. And that job lasts 6 to 9 months, average is about 7 months. And during that time, she's paid for the full-time job. 70% of her paid time is spent working in the business in some way. So on the production line, in our shipping department, maybe in our retail store. So helping us operate the business. Then 30% of her paid time is in program activities. So they're sort of non-revenue generating activities, kind of, if you think about it from a business standpoint.
Sure.
But there's time when they're working, we call it the U job, the YOU job, is when they're working on themselves. So that might be a computer class, or it might be a class where they're thinking about what their triggers for possible relapse might be. We really try to address the whole person, because the funny thing about work is we bring our whole selves to work, but we don't necessarily always, as employers, think about that and train for that. So what we're trying to do is help the women address all aspects of her life that have really gotten in the way of her getting and keeping employment.
Yeah. Your work is a huge part of your daily life. And I always say that with entrepreneurship, like, if you want to bring up all of your crap and you want to deal with all of your stuff, like become an entrepreneur, you'll have all sorts of time to deal with all the triggers and all the things that we each need to individually deal with our own stuff. So I love that you provide that space and recognize that these women need that extra support. So do you actually have staff then that are trained in those specific pieces, or do you partner with other nonprofits to help provide
It's
that?
both. It's both. We have staff who are our program staff. So again, like we're running, as I said, we're running two businesses. So we have our business operations people who are helping operate the food manufacturing business. And then we have our program operations people who are social workers and case managers. And they're working with the women during that 30% of their time. And so they're doing that. And then we're bringing volunteers from the community. So for instance, our computer classes are not led by our staff. They're led by community members who use that as an opportunity to both give back and also relay skills that they uniquely have. And we're not talking super, technical skills. We're talking about really basic computer skills, which anybody who works in with any technology would have, or bankers who come in and teach financial literacy. So a lot of what we do in a year, we probably have 350 or so volunteers who help us in a variety of ways. And so we get a lot done with people who are giving their time and supporting us in that way.
Yeah. So how many people do you have typically employed at a time? I saw you every month you do some hiring and whatnot and bring people on.
Right now we have a max capacity of about 15 to 18 women. We're in a great old building, Firehouse number 10, located just north of downtown Denver, but we're out of space. It's a 10,000 square foot building and we couldn't find a square inch, to save our lives. So in the spring, we're moving to a 20,000 square foot building, and that will allow us to grow our business, but of course, hire more women. And that's the business we're in. We're a sales driven organization, but sales create jobs. That's our purpose for creating sales, is so that we can hire more women. And it'll be really awesome to not have the space be the constraint for hiring women. Yeah. In a year right now, we hire between 50 and 60 women because we're hiring every month, but also every month women are leaving us to mainstream employment. So it's kind of a revolving door of employees. And then we have 12 or 13 full-time staff members who stay, our mainstay and provide the services or support the business. So it's a weird way to run a business because we hire intentionally women who we don't know if they're going to come to work every day, they're going to be on time, what else they've got going on. Yeah. And, what health issues or housing issues or things like that. We help them become stable and then they become great employees. And then by the time they become great employees, it's time for them to go and become somebody else's great employee.
Yeah. What are some, I'm sure you have a couple of, I'm sure you have lots of success stories, but do you have one or two that stand out in your mind that you're able to share?
Well, I've been doing this for a while, so a lot of stories come to mind. One in particular is a woman named Joy. And Joy, when she was 12, she was trying to find a way to spend more time with her parents who were drug users. So she started selling drugs to her parents' friends so that she could, be around them more. That didn't really work so well. So by the time she was 16, she was using. By the time she was 17, she was a mom. And then she continued to sell drugs and became a pretty big time drug dealer. And she said to me once, when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody who worked. Like everybody was sort of involved in this life. Sure. Eventually, she was such a big time drug dealer that she was convicted on federal charges. So that's pretty big time. Yeah. And by then, she also had 4 kids ranging in age from basically 8 to 18. So there are no federal women's prisons in Colorado. So she was sent out of state and she left her kids behind. By then, her mom was sober. So her kids stayed with her mom. When she came back and got her kids back, she was trying to, get her life together and keep her kids, in school and not following her path. And she had gotten her GED. She had enrolled in college and she started working at the Bean Project. And she was also getting $150 a month in food stamps. And she was figuring out how to feed 4 kids on $150 a month. because she started working for us, her food stamps got cut to $20 a month. And, we had this long conversation about how she was going to make that work. And, at the time, minimum wage was like $8.75, and that's all she was making, and had, $20 a month to feed her kids.
Wow.
She figured it out. She graduated, and I think sort of poetic justice is she went on to work for a food distributor, making $18 an hour, leveraging the forklift training that she'd gotten while she was at the Bean Project. And I love that story because it goes from this place of, no role models to knowing she wanted her kids' lives to be different in the long run, to figuring it out and not going back, even though kind of the system was working against her. And then ultimately, oddly enough, working for a food distributor, which I think is, like, that's an awesome full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, do you sell to her now? I don't know if she's still there, but
well, she's not still there anymore, but I just heard an update, and she was just hired by a company who we're friendly with, and they have a special initiative to hire second chance employees, and that's a term that's used for people with felony backgrounds or people who spent time in prison.
Yeah, so cool. So, well, I loved your story about how you like you said, you were an accidental food entrepreneur. So if you could just kind of share, your journey, how you came to the Women's Bean Project, and, and then we can get into, I'm sure you have had so many challenges and learnings of being thrown into basically CPG, right? You're like, oh, I now own a packaged food business, basically.
Exactly. Well, I have 2 science degrees. And so that, it's just starting with that doesn't make any sense. But my first job after getting my master's degree was with a subsidiary of Rush Medical Center in Chicago. And we were taking concepts out of the medical center and taking them to market. And that was my first taste of entrepreneurship. We got to take concepts and we got to put shape to them and take them to the marketplace. And that was when I realized that the science was a great background to have, but what it really excited me was entrepreneurism and creativity. So that's kind of been the theme of my career. I worked for a couple of different companies in a much more entrepreneurial space. And when I initially became acquainted with the Bean Project, I was working for a tech company from 99 to 2003. I was working for an internet company, which was a really cool time to be in that space. But the company I was working for was based in New York, and I was here in Denver. So I didn't have a connection to the local community, and I was looking for a way to volunteer and give back. And I started volunteering at the Bean Project because I loved the business model. I loved this idea that the better the business did, the more women could be served. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily about food, though I guess I'm kind of a foodie, but it was more about the business model and the mission. So I volunteered for about 6 months. And after about 6 months, the position of CEO came open. And I thought I knew the perfect person. And that was my girlfriend, Sarah. I tried to talk her into applying for the job. And according to her, I just went on and on about what a great place this was, until finally she said, if you think it's so great, why don't you apply? And that was 18 years ago. So she apparently was right. So it was accidental food entrepreneur in that, I didn't come here really because it was a food company. It was really much more because of the purpose, why we do the work.
Mm-hmm. So what have been some of the challenges being specifically a food business? Because if you were just making scarves, for instance, I mean, not that might have some of its own challenges, but I feel like a lot of times with all my people who start food businesses, it seems so easy to create food that you can share with people, right? Because it is from our home kitchens, and food brings us together and connection. But then there's the actual business of a food business.
Well, gosh, I mean, where do you even start? It's well, first of all, the food business, the food world has changed a ton since 1989. Yeah. I mean, it really, you used to be able to very easily just sort of, put up a table in your garage or your kitchen and make food and sell it. And that just is not the case anymore. It's so much more regulated. And of course, we're not, we were founded with $500 investment and making one bean soup mix and putting two women to work. And now, of course, we're much different operation. And so, of course, that complexity is much different. And we're sourcing materials from all different kinds of companies. But I think that maybe the biggest challenge is learning how to run a food manufacturing operation with all the regulations and all the, SOPs you have to have in place. And, I joke sometimes where nobody should ever wonder whether or not our food is safe. Most of our food is kosher, so the rabbis come, the FDA inspects, the health department, the weights and measures people check our scales. I mean, there are so many ways that that we're regulated and checked, and that people, customers should rest assured.
You guys are doing the hard work of,
of exactly.
That. Yeah. I do think, people who do self-manufacturing, I think that is greatly underestimated. And I know, you can get started self-manufacturing on a small scale, but anytime it starts getting large, like what you guys are doing, you basically, that's where I'm like, maybe go find a co-packer who's doing all of that for you, or else you have to take on all of those roles and do the food safety audits and have all of the inspectors in and make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, because it's a lot more.
Yeah. Our founder, when, I was probably a couple years into the job, and she had started the company in her late 50s, and she had gone back to school to get her master's in social work degree. And she was volunteering at a daytime homeless shelter for women and kids. So this, for her, wasn't about starting a food company. This was about starting a means for which the women could learn about working or work by actually working. So she said to me once that the first time somebody wanted a case of bean soup mix, which at the time was 12 units, she couldn't believe somebody wanted that many. So it wasn't started, like a lot of companies, it wasn't started with a mindset of how would we produce on a mass scale. And literally for the first 20 years of our existence, maybe even more, everything was filled manually. Right? Wow. And we used to, some of your listeners might remember 10 bean soup from Women's Bean Project. And it used to be in these sleeves, plastic sleeves, and there were 10 layers of beans. And those were filled 1/4 cup at a time, every single one of those bags. And, so it's also that evolution for, food companies of what's scalable and what's essential to your brand and your business. And then what is just, not scalable and you just have to let go.
Right. Like maybe we can mix the beans together.
Exactly. And more importantly, what we did was we went to our bean supplier and they mixed them for us. So they arrived pre-mixed with all 10 beans in it.
That's working smarter for sure. And you're still doing the plenty of work on site.
It's still 10 bean soup. Yeah.
Still 10 bean soup. Yes. So I'm so curious when, her name is Jossie, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Jossie. Where did she sell the first soup? Was it just like to friends and family? I'm sure she chose dried soup because it's food safe, right? It's like
exactly.
It was a good choice.
Yes. And the funny thing was there was no research or anything. She noticed that a lot of her friends were eating bean soup for health reasons. And so she had a chef friend develop a recipe for a dry soup mix. So what you get in our mixes you get all the beans and you get the spices. And then you typically at the end for 10 bean soup, you add tomatoes and then you have your soup. So it was, initially she sold to friends and family. It was very much that. The interesting thing was from that $500 investment, this was the fall of 1989. So they made soup for the holiday season. They made $6,100 in sales. And I don't know what the price point was, but that's a pretty good ROI if you think about it.
Yeah.
We were really fortunate. A couple of things happened fairly early on. One was that so that was 1989. I believe about 1992, we got into King Soopers.
Okay.
And one could argue we had no business getting into King Supers, but that was a really awesome partnership. And we today, to this day, we're in every Kroger store in the state of Colorado. And then there are, some of your listeners might have heard of 10,000 Villages. And there at its peak, there were about 125 10,000 Villages stores around the country. And we got into those. We got a relationship, and we're still one of the only food companies, A and B companies that are not 10,000 Villages sourced, that you can find in a 10,000 Villages store. So those two things happening pretty early in our history made a pretty big difference to our trajectory, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. And you can't predict those things. You don't know what's going to be the thing. A lot of people are like, tell me the map, like what's going to happen first, second, and third. It's like, once you get a product, like, I don't know exactly. We're going to try a whole bunch of things and you're going to put it out there. I just had one of my clients just texted me right before we got on, and he said, I just got on a radio show. My friend is friends with the producer, and he bought a case, and like, they're talking about me on the radio, and it's like, you just can't predict that stuff. Like, you don't know what the thing is that's going to catch, right? But you don't keep trying.
Or for whom. Yeah. I mean, you don't know that just one person. It just happened to us this past week. I'd gotten an email from someone who had received a gift box from somebody last year, and she had on her list that she needed to get in contact with us. And she, it took her until this year to do it. And she and I had a phone conversation, and at the end, she said, "I'd like to make a contribution to your capital campaign, because we're moving to a new building." And this week we got a gift. So she's a first-time donor, and we got a gift to our capital campaign. And it was really all because this original person sent them a gift box. So, those kinds of things, what I've learned to trust is those kinds of things happen all the time. But I think the key really is, I guess maybe it's interrelated, but twofold. One is, it's really about your story. What story do you have that's going to ignite somebody's imagination? I joke that since I've been at Women's Bean Project, I've become a lot more interesting at cocktail parties. But it's really because someone says, "What do you do?" And I'll say, "I'm a CEO of Women's Bean Project." And, we might be at this big table, and it gets quiet because everybody wants to hear about it. Because people want to understand or want to hear the story that's different and unique. And so I think that is part of it. And then also knowing that if a customer knowing that their purchase makes a difference. And I don't think you need to be a nonprofit for that. I think if you can do a good job, whether it's on your product or, on your actual packaging or through your marketing, talking about the impact of somebody's purchase, I think people more and more want that. They want to feel like, I'm not just buying this product and lining, some venture capitalist's pockets, but I'm really making a difference to an entrepreneur and their family, and and the survivability of their business.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can extrapolate that. Telling a story about your business and about your brand is so important. And I think, experiential eating, experiential purchasing in general is definitely on the rise. I think with younger generations, millennials, and and things coming up too. Like I mean, it just feels good. It feels good that your money that you're spending, like, it's a value exchange. And in addition to getting bean soup and getting a meal, I'm also getting, like, I'm supporting, I'm helping, there's this whole other layer of feel good. And I think you can do that in, even like you said, even if you're not a nonprofit, but, what is your story as an entrepreneur? I have a number of clients that give back, to pets, pet organizations or other nonprofits. So I think you can tell that story in different ways. That has an impact on people's buying habits.
I agree.
Yeah. I love, you had a story too about, I think you were featured in a magazine or an article.
Oh, last year we were featured in the New York Times Holiday Gift Guide in 2020. And we didn't know it was going to happen. One of our supporters is a contributing writer to the New York Times. And so the staff was asked who they'd recommend for the gift guide. And it wasn't even like the big gift guide. It was just the like little wellness gift guide. And we were, maybe there were 6 companies listed and we were the last one listed. And it ran the day before Thanksgiving. And from Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday, we did as much orders in those 5 days as we normally do for an entire holiday season. It was overwhelming. Well, so the funny thing is, a follow-up to that is that this year we said, hey, if you're going to put us in your gift guide again, could you just give us a heads up? And they said, no, we never mention people more than once. And so we went into the holiday season like, okay, we don't have to worry about that. Well, on Thanksgiving Day, New York Times put into their gift guide, and the big winner for the 2020 holiday gift guide is Women's Bean Project. And they put a link to our site.
Oh my God.
And it felt like a really good backhanded compliment, right? Like it wasn't real. They didn't mention us. They just mentioned us from last year.
And was crazy sales.
So our sales are
did it beat last year?
Yeah, we're up year over year. But it's been a little bit more metered. So that's been good.
Yeah.
It's been, instead of that big lump that, then we have to get through the system. We have a little bit of a lump, but it's not the same. Just that, and anybody listening could relate to. I think back to in the early days of the internet, there was this one commercial where this company launched a website and there were like 5 people standing around the computer waiting for the first order. And the first order came and they were like, yay, all celebrating. And then all of a sudden it went, order after order, and the website crashed. And, it felt a little bit like that last year. Like New York Times holiday gift guide. Are you kidding me? Who wouldn't want that?
Right. I've been talking a lot this week with my founders that I work with, saying, there's this, and you as a CEO could probably speak to this, but there's this notion that's like, at some point I shouldn't have any problems in my business. Like, what are all these problems? Why is there another one? And I like to say, like, the sooner we can just accept that we're always going to have like 10 problems floating to the surface, and we just get really good at solving problems. I mean, that's a great problem to have, but it's still a problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it really, it's not that you ever solve the problems. It's just a whack-a-mole game, right? Like I'm beating down that problem so that another problem can pop up, over somewhere else. Yeah. And I think the day you stop having problems is the day you probably stop having business, which is a whole other problem.
Yep.
Because we're moving to larger space, and so much in the last few years, so much of our problems, how we would think about them, have been space related.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting to me as the leader is thinking about, okay, when we take away, I will use air quotes, the excuse of the building being too small, and we move to space twice as big, what problems are we going to uncover?
Right.
Because there will be other ones that the space doesn't forgive, but certainly for a long time, the space has been our challenge. We've not only made our own products, but we really would like to expand to doing work for other companies. As long as we're creating jobs, it doesn't have to be only Women's Bean Project products. And we've had quite a few opportunities to do that, and the space has been the constraint. So I'm looking forward to being able to work with other companies, whether it's, packaging. We've worked with Empower bars to take single flavor cases and put them into mixed flavor case packs.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple work, but perfectly suited for our kind of, our kind of shop. Right. So I'm looking forward to not only taking the problems but more importantly, taking the problems that we have and making them into opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some real opportunities there. I mean, there's so many food businesses in around the area that be careful what you wish for. I can already think of a number. I'm like, oh, these people and these people.
Well, and what a good problem to have for us. Because, just because we move to bigger space doesn't mean our sales will automatically grow. But what it does is our capacity grows. And so our capacity to not only do our own business, but to potentially do business for others is a lot greater. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about that. And I also think with respect to problems, I think the most important thing, particularly as a leader of a company, and I think this would apply to a leader of a department or a leader of a team, it's about your approach to the problem. If you approach the problem from the standpoint of, I have the confidence we can figure this out, but let's not have the paralysis of sitting here and trying to anticipate all the problems, because I guarantee we'll anticipate the wrong ones and we'll solve for them in a way that won't make sense when the problem actually comes up. So at some point, you just got to go and feel comfortable and confident that you can address the problems as they arise. And I think often there's so much fear that of problems that we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Oh, I love that, because I have either people that never get started, right? Because they're like, but what about this? And what about that? I mean, I just did an interview with a client that was like, it took me months before I finally made the decision to do this, because I was all up in my head and was trying to anticipate all the problems. And it's like, you always have to start before you're ready. But then also just going, that I am capable. I can figure this out. We can figure this out. And, find resources like myself, or, find resources to help you. Don't do it in a vacuum, but you're not alone trying to figure out these problems. Every entrepreneur is doing the same thing.
Well, and also one thing I know for sure is that you never build infrastructure first, right? You put it in after the fact to fix the pain. Yeah. So you don't sit around and create an HR department and, an accounting department and all these things before you have revenue and employees and all of that. You create all those things for the situation that you're in. And I think that sometimes can get overwhelming, because you look at a company that is, has been around longer or is bigger, and you say, well, but I can't start because I don't have this and this and this. Well, but of course you don't, because you also don't have sales and employees.
Right. You don't need all of those things. You will get there. Yeah. I'm in the middle of doing some team restructuring and things like that. And thinking about, how do I step more into a leadership role in my business, and how do I help other founders do the same, go from being a solopreneur to now maybe having an employee or working with other contractors, and how do you lead and but yeah, all of that stuff I couldn't have built it 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't have a need.
I think of it as the difference between working in your business versus working on your business.
Yeah.
And that's the transition you're talking about, I think, is now if you get to take a step back, you can work on your business instead of being chief cook and bottle washer.
Right. Right. And then you guys expanded how long ago into other products? Because now you have quite a few, and I think you bring in a lot and then repack them. Is that right? How you're doing it?
Yeah, some of our newer products are snacks and things like that are already made, and we're packaging them. So from the very beginning, we had bean soup mix, and we have 6 different bean soup mixes. Cornbread mix was pretty early in our history, but we've added brownie mix and cookie mix. And what I like about baking mixes is, for somebody who's not a baker, to get a mix and just add butter or an egg or whatever, then you have no leftover flour and sugar and all that kind of stuff, but you look like you're totally a baker. I mean, it's really awesome for somebody who's not. So the challenge we've had, though, is that bean soup does not say summer. And so we have been very winter seasonal our whole history. And anybody who's in a seasonal business can attest to the fact that it's really hard when you make, for us,
ice cream.
Exactly. We make 70% of our sales between September and December.
Yeah.
And, so we've introduced other products as in an attempt to sort of even that out a little bit.
Okay. That makes sense.
What I'm finding is that the tide is rising, but we still have the peak during this time of year, and that's fine. But I just don't want it to be crickets in July.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We had this great opportunity to hire Sterling Rice Group a few years ago, and they helped us think about how, being a 32-year-old company is great, and I think in some ways could potentially make us vulnerable in that the way people ate in 1989 and the way they ate in 2021 isn't necessarily the same. So we wanted to look at how people eat has changed and what products could we introduce to augment our bean soup, not to necessarily to replace it, but that was a bit more contemporary with how people eat. And so that's where the snacks and the popcorn, the instant beans and rice cups, that's where those all came in. The great thing about that work was that we still have a new product pipeline that will carry us forward into, the next several years. And that's pretty exciting for me anyway, to think about what else we could do.
Yeah. Wow. That's really neat. Now you can update, I guess you have to update the instructions for Instant Pot, right?
We did. Yeah, we did do that. It's funny because everything was changing and people weren't really eating at home or, making soup, and then Instant Pot came out. And so, the great thing about that is, we'd once we needed to figure out how to do it, we got an Instant Pot and we made it, and it's super easy. Then people started eating at home again, and I think they in some respects went back to their slow cookers last year. So now we're set regardless of which direction it goes, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Crock pot, stove, Instapot. But yes, that's somewhat how things have changed over the years. But now I read on your website that you cover about 60% of your costs with the sales of the products. And then I'm assuming the rest is fundraising and donations.
Exactly. It's grants and donations. We're not typically government funded, in part because we've just found that the flexibility we have with grants and donations has served us well. We're not subject to sort of the whim of a new administration or things like that. So we have, several thousand donors who support us in a variety of ways and at different levels. And it's really much more grassroots kind of support that we tend to get. If you go to our website and you make a purchase, you have the option to round up. So there are lots and lots of donations that have come in at a couple dollars. But in the course of a year, what that does is it allows us to pay the women during the time that they're, say, in a computer class or they're working on their own resume or getting ready to go out for job search. When a woman gets to the point where she's finished the program, it's time for her to start finding a job in the community. We pay her during the time that she's looking for a job. So grants and donations allow us to pay them and then also bring the resources in for the classes that, we do need to pay for.
Okay.
So that the nice thing is if you were to silo the business pays for itself. The sales pay for the business with a small profit, small contribution to the program. But really, grants and donations are what makes the program possible.
Very cool. I was made my question. I was trying to figure out how to word it like in the right way, like sensitively, but is the food part of it profitable? Because I work with a lot of people and they finally do the numbers and they're like, oh, I'm like maybe breaking even, or I'm actually paying money every sale I get. So I was curious, how the profitability measured up, and assuming that all of the other hours and some of those pieces.
It's not, I would, it's profitable definitely with a small p.
Yes.
Because, and we all know that food is not a high margin, product. So that's the biggest challenge is, we're making, our average price point is probably $3. And so, it takes a big hill of beans to make, a couple million bucks.
Yeah. I know. I sometimes people look at me like, what? Wait a second. I'm like, yeah, like we're talking, 3 to 5%. Like at the end of the day, like if you want to be rich, I don't know that the food industry is where you want to go. Most people get into it because they're passionate about their food and they want to be an entrepreneur and try their hand. Like this is their passion. So I get it. But
exactly. As some people have said, often because we are, a 32-year-old nonprofit social enterprise, and many nonprofits, are looking for ways to find a revenue source that doesn't have strings attached, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I often say I would not recommend food for all the reasons we've already talked about, margin and regulation, and That said, one advantage of versus, you use the example of scarves earlier. It's great to be in a consumable product business.
Yeah.
Because we have
every day, multiple times.
But there are only so many scarves, you want to buy. So that has, I think, definitely worked in our favor. And we have customers who will tell me that they've been customers since the early 90s. So that's, and now we also, have the next generation where someone will say, I remember my mom volunteered. Yeah. And that's, I love that part about it, that we have this mainstay within the community where, people remember us and have memories of Women's Bean Project as part of it growing up.
Yeah, it's been I'm fairly new to Denver, and somebody told me about it a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. What a neat story. So it's so fun to learn more about it, and I'd love to get more involved as well and check it out. So
I know I'm biased because I've been here for a long time, but I will say it's one of those places that really makes you want to know more. And as witnessed by the fact that almost all of our products have a sticker sealing the product that says lovingly handmade by, and it's a signature of a woman in the program. And I can't tell you how often we get letters from somebody, in New Jersey, let's say, and that person says, dear Susan, I just had your bean soup and it was so delicious and I love what you're doing. And, it's really a marketer's dream come true if you think about it. Like we never looked that customer in the eye because they bought it at a store in New Jersey. And yet they felt compelled enough based on the story of the company to write a letter or send an email. Or yesterday I picked up the phone and it was a lady saying, you know what? I got your soup as a present and I just made it. And I just called to tell you it's so delicious. Like nobody would do that like Campbell's. Nobody would.
Right. It's probably not happening.
Yeah. I mean, how cool is that to actually, have a job where, people, you get the opportunity to hear people's appreciation.
Wow. I love this. So tell people where they can go to buy the products, how they can support you. I'm assuming you're on social media as well to some extent.
We are. So on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you can find us at Women's Bean Project. So that's super easy. To buy where you can find all of our products is womensbeanproject.com. Then you can find us in all the King Soopers and Safeway stores, and then every Whole Foods in the region. So we're, fairly easy to find in grocery, not our whole selection necessarily, but in King Soopers, we're in the dried bean section, and then Safeway, we're in the soup section, and Whole Foods, we actually have a couple different aisles where you can find our mixes and our soups. But those grocery partners have been really awesome for us.
Yeah. And it's a good partnership, right? They're feeling good, right? Like it's just a win-win-win. You can.
It is, but I will say it's not philanthropic on their part. If we don't sell through, we don't keep our shelf space. So, it does require management. It does, it's not a given that we will get to stay in. So I don't want anybody to think that, we get this advantage because. And literally because of that, a lot of times we end up like on the bottom shelf. If you go into King Soopers, you're going to find us on the bottom shelf. It's definitely not great placement. Or in Safeway, we're like way up at the top where you can't reach it without, a tall person. So, but Whole Foods actually does give us really awesome placement on shelf. So, but we got that because we sell through.
Yeah. We went to, we had our holiday event and we were doing gift bag or, putting together bags for Metro Carrying, and we bought a bunch of product from Locavore, and, we just like cleared the whole shelf. So if you guys got a big order,
that explains it.
We were like, oh my gosh, look at this. How great. So yeah. So, and then those went to Metro Carrying. So it was
that's
fun.
awesome. Yeah. A few years ago, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority bought a pallet of 10 bean soup and donated it to Food Bank of the Rockies. And totally coincidentally, somebody else donated a pallet of tomatoes, canned tomatoes. And so they were able to pair those because, the 10 bean soup calls for tomatoes at the end. And it was, sort of a match made in heaven. It couldn't have been better.
I'm sure those things just, if you allow them, if you're open to them, you don't get so focused on the day-to-day grind of things. You're like, wow, like I bet, miracles like that are just happening all the time. It's such
the universe tends to align. I've learned.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us, being on this podcast, just sharing the story. I think it's such a inspiring, different path of a CPG brand. But I appreciate your leadership and doing what you're doing, and those women that are, changing their lives. It's pretty amazing.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to have the opportunity to talk about the work that we do.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Happy holidays. And thanks so much for being here.
Thanks. You too.
I want to wish you guys a really happy holiday. May it be filled with lots of delicious food and celebration and connection, because we are all bonded together in food and a way that it brings us together. That is one of the huge reasons why I got involved in this industry, because I saw the power of food and how it brings us together and creates community. So you guys are my community. I want to encourage you to come join me inside the private Facebook group. That is where we can have more of these conversations. I would love for you to post your wins and be listing your gains and the progress that you have made this year. That is the place to start having these conversations, and surround yourself by other like-minded people doing amazing things in this industry. Until next time, have an amazing week. Are you ready to start that delicious idea that you make in your home kitchen, or grow your existing packaged food business and take it to the next level? The most successful food business entrepreneurs have support, guidance, focus, and accountability to help them make it happen quickly without wasting time or money. Plus, I think starting your packaged food business should actually be fun. Food business success is your secret ingredient to creating your food business dream. Please don't go this alone. Check out the private free Food Business Success Facebook group to connect with other foodpreneurs, get your questions answered quickly, share your wins, and receive special